disorders. Let's do it.
So you've got learning objectives. Go through all of them, as you said. So, introduction, just looking at what we're going to be talking about today. Obviously, we're talking about excessive use. When you have a substance-related disorder, even if you take, ecstasy or, a Schedule III drug, if you take it once, you don't meet criteria. You do not necessarily meet criteria. Even if you take heroin, likely you're going to take it more than once, because it's heroin, but it needs to be something that you are seeing more often than just once. Also, you're going to be looking at tolerance. How much can one body take? You're seeing tolerance increase a lot of times for someone who meets criteria for a substance use disorder, and that, it's not just one beer, right? Like, these are people who are taking 9 beers at a time. That if you were to then, stop taking any of these drugs, to stop drinking, whatever it is, that you would experience some withdrawals. That, if you're not experiencing withdrawals, chances are you haven't developed an addiction. And then also there's a dependence that you feel like you really need it. A lot of people, they smoke pot on the weekend, once a month. It's not that same level of dependence. They're not going to have withdrawals. Maybe they're going to grow their tolerance and they need a little more, but you're not going to have that dependence and withdrawal. So I do want you to keep that in mind, that I'm definitely not endorsing drug usage, substance usage, but just don't overly pathologize someone who's tried it once. Okay, so we've just got examples. We're going to be going through all of them. We have seen, that this has been around for a long period of time in ancient cultures, that they have been using alcohol, producing alcohol for long periods of time, and that we even see people abusing it, going back to the ancient Egyptians and, Italians who first made wine. This has been around for a long period of time. But again, we're not pathologizing, but alcoholism refers to the harmful use of alcohol. And, I'm sure a lot of you know people who have one glass of wine a night, not an alcoholic. Because what we need to see is that you have to have heavy episodes of drinking. And what that includes is 6 or more alcoholic beverages, at least one occasion, at least once per month. So that's 6 in a night. That is, I think, kind of hard to do. Hard to get up to that number. What we see just across prevalency rates is that the lifespan of the average person with alcohol dependence is approximately 12 years shorter than the rest of the population. It's associated with diabetes, stroke, cardiovascular disease, a lot of really negative health problems, on top of the fact that if they were to, poison themselves with alcohol, they would likely die, or potentially die. And, with withdrawals from alcohol, you're going to have, severe symptoms. Alcohol abuse cuts across all age, educational, occupational, and socioeconomic boundaries. I will say that you do have a risk factor again when you have lower socioeconomic status and come from a minority or marked group. Again, because you have higher stress. And with that higher stress, sometimes people look to more maladaptive coping. I think that's what a lot of these substance use disorders really hit at. It's an attempt to cope. It's an attempt to self-medicate. And when you have higher risk factors, when you have more difficulties throughout your lifetime, you're going to be just reaching for more coping mechanisms, and not all of those are going to be adaptive. Again, very detrimental physical characteristics and effects that we've already mentioned. Obviously, more likely to be in accidents, because if they're driving, it's going to affect your abilities. And then also for violent crime, because impulsiveness is going to increase as you are taking drinking alcohol or taking any of these substances. I wouldn't say any, a lot of these substances. and that your impulsivity is going to go up and your ability to control those compulsions is going to be going down. So it is more likely to have that violent crime. You see a lot of alcoholism, especially in intimate partner violence and home violence, within the family. We do see this to be more common in men. One of the reasons that we do assume this to be is just like their body makeup, that they need to have more alcohol to experience, that buzz that most people are going for. And then as you're drinking more and more, these side effects are obviously going to increase. We also see 37% of alcohol abusers suffer from at least one coexisting mental disorder. Again, it's that attempt to be self-medicating, that there's something else going on for them, that this abuse of this alcohol stemmed from an earlier, difficulty that they were experiencing mentally, emotionally, whatever it is. Here we have a list of all these different problems. I already hit on that intimate partner violence. Again, potentially stemming from that impulsivity. We also have, just a higher likelihood of injury, whether that's, they're stumbling around, they're walking, or they're in a car accident. Obviously, you're going to be more impaired when you are high or drunk, whatever it is. Auto accidents, again, hitting at that impulsivity, you're going to see the potential for more murder, assaults, and rapes. Even if, they didn't have the, intention to kill someone, maybe they just wanted to push them and then pushed them too hard, they fell on their head and they died. Like that happens. And then again, those negative health outcomes. Comorbidities, again, it's at 37% for a number of mental disorders. What we're seeing most often is depression. That kind of just makes sense. They're maybe trying to numb their pain. And that is what you feel a lot of time when you feel that buzz, you feel a little drunk, it's that numbing of those emotions. But many alcoholics die by suicide. Again, it may not be intentionally that they're dying by suicide. Again, it could just be that they drank too much that time, their body couldn't handle it, and they poisoned themselves. Still counts as suicide because you can't really ask someone, right? Like, did you mean to do that? Especially, unfortunately, when the attempt is successful. We do see that those who abuse alcohol are much more likely to use other substances and to have an eating disorder. And I think that's kind of interesting. And then we do see a lot of alcohol use with personality disorders. Again, it's a very painful life having these personality disorders a lot of the time. Thinking about borderlines, the video that we saw, but any of the personality disorders that we saw, it's that disregard potentially for other people, feeling like they, are untouchable, whatever it is, can lead them to self-medicate, to want to numb, or just have, disregard. So they, think it feels good, so they just keep doing it. The clinical picture as far as what this would look like for alcohol-related disorders is that it can have, very complex and contradictory effects on the brain, in that with higher levels of alcohol, it actually depresses the brain, that it makes it more depressed, even though they were trying to self-medicate and numb out the feelings to make it better. In the long run, it makes it worse. But then at lower levels, maybe y'all can think of this just in your own drinking, it kind of makes you feel good. And that actually stimulates the brain, and different cells activate those pleasure areas. It's just then people want to keep that up, keep that buzz going. You hit too far and it goes downhill. Again, the amount for different people is going to vary as far as what their tolerance is. The amount of bodily fluids and oxygen and water that they have in their body is going to very much determine what that tipping point is for different people. And that's just important to note. Alcohol myopia, as we have here, is the different effects that alcohol can have on different drinkers. Again, it's very much dependent on the individual person, how much they eat, how much they weigh, what their tolerance is, how long they've been drinking for, what their physical condition is. All of that is very much going to depend on the effects that the alcohol is going to have on them. And the alcohol myopia is the short-sightedness that occurs under the influence of alcohol, like thinking that you can handle more than you can't, not listening to your bodily cues as far as, stop. This is not healthy for us. This isn't working as we wanted it to anymore. And that can be, obviously very dangerous. Here we have that commonly observed changes over time in blood alcohol concentration. The dashed line is blood alcohol concentration, BAC. And then alcohol hangover severity is the red line here. And hangover severity is most pronounced when blood alcohol concentration reaches 0. So in this example, it's at about 12 to 14 hours after the start of alcohol consumption. So keep this in mind. Drink water, drink pickle juice. I've heard that that's helpful too. But that's what that is noting, that when blood alcohol consumption actually reaches 0, that's when the hangover is the worst. And that's also sometimes when people are like, drink a little more if you've got a hangover. That's really dangerous. Don't do that. But it will probably make you feel better short term, not long term. What we also see as far as the development of these alcohol-related disorders is that we go from excessive drinking that maybe starts a lot of times in college, and that it starts from this like fun party time, and then it just keeps getting more and more dysregulated. Like you need more and more to reach, your tolerance builds, and you need more and more to have that strong feeling that you remembered to have a good time, but then alcohol just ends up depressing you, because that's what happens in our brain at higher levels of alcohol. So it goes from early to middle to late stages. And what we have here is the what happens in each of these, and that in those early stages, it's not an obvious impairment, you're building up your tolerance. In the middle stages, you develop some cravings, that's starting to happen. You also start to have some physical symptoms, in that you have a list here. That nausea, I think, is what most people resonate with. But also you can have sweatiness, shakiness, and enlarged pupils. And then that late stage is the loss of control. The disease impacts physically, socially, and mentally. Sorry I'm racing through this, but I feel like a lot of this is like stuff y'all have kind of just known from being adults in the world, and want to get through as much as we can together. Again, the physical effects are going to be chronic. They are going to have an effect on people's bodies. As I mentioned before, 12 years, you're cutting off 12 years of your life. So if you were going to die at 82, now you're dying at 70. Think about it that way. And that's, really young. What we see a lot of times as far as contributing factors to the physical effects that are very long-term, cirrhosis of the liver, you just totally ruined your liver. A lot of people need liver transplants, and that comes with a lot of ethical dilemmas about, like, we're giving someone a liver for someone who ruined their own, where empathy as far as, yes, they're probably, trying to self-medicate and they don't want to do this again, but what if they, have a setback and they relapse into drinking again and they ruin this person's liver and it should have gone to someone else? Lots of difficult decisions with that for different medical professionals. A lot of times this comes with malnutrition, and that maybe they're throwing out their food, or that they're just not eating it as much because they're just substituting alcohol, and they recognize they get younger faster when they eat less. And then obviously stomach pains, you're just like burning up your insides with all this alcohol. So no, not good. We do also see that there's a lot of comorbidities. Again, as I mentioned, about 37% meet criteria for some other disorder. Depression's towards the top. Again, we see that most often. But we do sometimes actually see that there can be some moderate psychotic symptoms when people are using alcohol excessively and they meet criteria for this disorder, and that they could experience chronic fatigue, oversensitivity, impaired reasoning, personality deterioration, So all of those things can actually look a little bit like on the verge of some psychosis. Probably doesn't meet criteria for psychosis, again, because I happen to know that there's a criteria for different psychotic disorders that say it's not alcohol related, that these symptomatologies that they are experiencing are not stemming from alcohol abuse. So there's that. But it does look like it. Yeah, that's what I wanted to note on that one. So the clinical picture, as far as someone who is having difficulty with alcohol abuse, they can, experience those hallucinations, that disorientation, can again be, looking like on the verge of psychosis. It can last, 3 to 6 days, especially depending on how much alcohol that they're putting into their bodies, into their systems. They can have also amnesia, as in they can have memory loss. They're also just burning up brain cells. They can be very disoriented. And again, you can just have some severe brain damage that's irreversible. What we also see as far as those causal factors, as I mentioned again, a lot of times, I know it's only 37% that they meet a comorbid disorder. I think, I look at every person that has some substance use disorder as they're trying to self-medicate. Happy people don't do this. So let's look at the biological, psychosocial, and sociocultural factors that are at play here. So for those biological factors, we do see that there is a very strong genetic disposition for some people to be more at risk or more vulnerable to addiction in general. And then on top of that, specifically to alcohol. We see that actually in different cultures, that the Irish have a culture of enjoying alcohol together. And we have seen genetic links or lines that we've been able to, I say we, the researchers have been able to differentiate and say that, this genetic link is what is predisposing people for different alcohol disorders. Also, people from Russia, they drink a lot of vodka in their culture, and they just are more likely to have a higher tolerance for vodka, and then that can lead to a predisposition to abuse it because they're having more of it. What we also see is that there's a big element of exposure learning, that if this is a large part of your culture, a large part of your family, you're learning to drink at an earlier age. And the earlier age that you start drinking, the more likely that you're going to abuse it later in life. So I grew up with this, but something maybe to really discuss with your family is like, if you see alcohol, you want to have it in the home, I'd rather you have it in the home here than do it illegally with your friends. I do see that logic, but we do also know that the younger someone has alcohol, even if it is, in a controlled way within the family, it predisposes them to actually have difficulties later in life. Not what people had originally thought of, like, oh, they can tolerate it more later. In fact, they're just more likely to drink more of it later. What we also see is like a neurobiology connection, the MCLP, which is, it is the center of a brain where psychoactive drug activation happens, and that some people are just more predisposed to have that be more pleasurable, that it lights up more for them than it does for other individuals. I'll just say that. We have here on this next slide just a picture of the brain. Again, I'm not going to try to say it, but here it is listed out here. That word, pathway. And that is running from the ventral tegmental area, right over here, to the nucleus accumbens, that are here, to the prefrontal cortex. And what that does is the central release of dopamine, right? It's that really good feeling that we all have, and that mediates the reward properties of the drugs. And there are some people who just experience more dopamine, who have this, pathway enhanced. It's just stronger for them, and it's more likely that they're going to be addicted because it just feels better for them. There's also some people who, that taste of alcohol that a lot of people are like, oh, that's disgusting. You take a shot and you're like, what? A lot of people, they just like their genetic makeup makes it that it doesn't taste as bad to them. and that also makes it they're more likely to have alcohol disorders. Let me go back. Anyway, oh, I have a double slide. Oh no, it just looks similar. Never mind. No, we have this.
It's the exact same.
That is. I'm sorry. I don't know why it doubled. That's. I guess I copied it by accident. What we also have are, just a list of impairments that happen when they do have this alcohol-related disorder. There's substantial research on alcohol-related disorders as far as the effects that it has in people's day-to-day lives. What we can see, is obviously failures in parental guidance is oftentimes linked to this. Psychological vulnerability, there's a lot of stress, tension reduction, and reinforcement in their lives. Again, trying to reduce that tension, self-medication, expectations maybe, like high expectations are leading them to drink, marital or relationship crisis, again, just trying to numb. I think that's just overarching. These are all specific examples. We're just trying to numb what's happening in their world. What we also see is that this, again, has a lot of links to different personality disorders, such as antisocial personality disorder, schizophrenia, and depression are also linked as different, those aren't personality disorders, but they're also linked again to this. Again, just trying to numb, trying to stop those thoughts as best as they can. Yes, Cyrus? I haven't seen that in the research. Because I could see it being susceptible in two different ways. The introverts, they, just want to be on their own. They're not having other people watch them drink maybe. They, are, just trying to quiet their thoughts just on their own and relax. Then I can also see maybe the extroverts who are out at parties, are around it more often, it's free flowing, they get energy and stimulation from being around other people, and then they start drinking.
The reason
Lemon study? Mm-hmm.
they have I don't know if it's extroverts, but rated the taste of sourness to lemon. I might be this.
I don't know.
Introverts felt extreme sourness.
But wouldn't that then, because of that other study that we have, that some people don't taste the alcohol as bad as others, if you're more sensitive, then maybe you're gonna taste it. I don't know. I don't know the study. I don't know. But if they're feeling it more strongly at smaller amounts of the substance, then they're less likely to have an alcohol use disorder. I don't know. I don't know the study. Sorry, and I haven't seen in research that there's a difference between introverts and extroverts on this one. Families, have a big factor in this as far as the predisposition, whether that's the presence of alcoholism within the genetic line, and that there's a lot of heritability. We do see it associated, especially with fathers, but then again, we see more men abusing alcohol than women. Marital conflict, and that's if you are the married person or if you're the child of the married people with conflict. Very lax, maybe maternal supervision, and that, you have easy access to the liquor cabinet. Again, younger age you get started, more likely that you're gonna have use later of the substance later. Moving actually a lot during early family years, not having that stability, not having that social connection, those deeper friendships that can develop when you stay in one place. Lack of attachment with the father and lack of family cohesiveness. So binge drinking in college definitely can be a gateway to having alcohol use disorders. You can probably think of some friends that you think, maybe have a problem with this. We do see that 4 out of 5 college students drink alcohol, and half the students who engage in some binge drinking. So already just with that, as we mentioned, binging, you're going to be seeing as 6 drinks or more. And with that, that can happen pretty easily on a college campus in one Saturday night. So you're already, hitting at that main criteria for this disorder. 25% of college students experience academic problems from their drinking, and that may be they drink the night before and don't get to class, and maybe they're not studying. So many different reasons why that could be. And then, there's a lot of peer pressure, I think, to have fun in frats or in sororities, hazing, whatever it is, and, just wanting to be a little more confident in the party. It can lead to binge drinking behaviors. We do see for different sociocultural factors that are at play is that there are religions that, just don't allow alcohol. As far as two that I have here are those who are Islamic or who are Mormon. It's just prohibited. And we do see in those religions that they are less likely to have alcohol abuse disorders. So that's good. We do see that for those who have more of a cultural tradition, again, I mentioned those specific from Russian descent or Irish descent have genetic factors and links that predispose people to alcoholism. Also, we see a maybe more cultural tradition of aggression and aggressive behaviors can also predispose people to use that more often. We also see geographic location. Again, we see actually another two countries, Denmark and Malta, as having very high incidence of alcohol abuse. We also see places that are like darker more, that are like higher in the just the globe, that they're like closer to the two poles, that there's like very dark times throughout like the summers or the winters, depending on where they are, that can predispose people for alcohol abuse. So that's that. Also in cold locations, that's another. Oh, wow. Okay, so did I finish up? Let's just do quickly this. Here we have list of medications. These two, the antabuse and the naltrexone, block the desires to drink. And then Valium is what they use to help the acute withdrawal symptoms. Okay, we're at time, so we'll talk about treatment next week. Alrighty, y'all, thanks so much, and have a good